The chandeliers of Ashworth Manor blazed like captured stars, but Helena Fairfax had learned long ago that she was not meant to shine. She stood beside a marble column, invisible among the glittering masses, holding her cousin's shawl like a servant waiting for dismissal. The silk was warm from Lady Prudence's shoulders, and Helena clutched it tighter as she watched the dancers spin past in clouds of perfume and whispered promises. "You're staring again." Lady Prudence's voice cut through the music like a blade. She had returned from the dance floor, her cheeks flushed, her eyes sharp with that particular cruelty she reserved for Helena alone. "It's unseemly. People will think you want something you cannot have." Helena lowered her gaze. "I was merely watching the orchestra, cousin." "Were you?" Prudence snatched the shawl from Helena's hands. "Your dress is showing its age. Stand behind the fern. I don't want Lord Ashby to see you hovering like some poor relation." Which is exactly what I am, Helena thought, but she moved toward the potted plant without argument. 3 seasons of this, 3 seasons of holding shawls and fetching lemonade and pretending she didn't remember what it felt like to dance. The crowd shifted then, a murmur rippling through the ballroom like wind across water. Helena glanced up despite herself, and her breath caught. He had arrived. Alexander Ashford, the Duke of Ravenswood, stood in the doorway like a shadow given form. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black evening clothes that made every other man look like a painted imitation. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, his jaw carved from stone, and his eyes, God help her, his eyes, were the color of winter storms. Cold, distant, dangerous. They called him the Duke of Ice. The whispers said his late wife had frozen to death in his presence, though Helena knew that was merely society's way of explaining a woman who had died of pneumonia. The whispers also said he had loved his wife to madness or hated her to ruin, depending on who was telling the tale. He never danced. He never smiled. He attended events only when duty demanded it, and even then he stood apart, watching the frivolity with barely concealed contempt. Their eyes met. Helena's heart slammed against her ribs. It was an accident, it had to be. A random collision of gazes across a crowded room. She should look away. She should, but she didn't. And neither did he. Something flickered in those storm-grey eyes. Not interest exactly. Something sharper. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never been introduced. Helena felt suddenly exposed, as if he could see through her faded dress to the woman underneath, the woman who had once had prospects and hopes, and a father who called her his treasure. Then he looked away, and Helena could breathe again. "The Duke of Ravenswood," Prudence breathed beside her, having materialized like a perfumed ghost. "They say he's finally looking for a new wife. Imagine, a duchess's coronet." Her eyes narrowed at Helena. "Don't even think about it. He would never look twice at someone like you." Helena said nothing. She had stopped thinking about anything at all. The evening crawled on. Helena fetched champagne, held wraps, smiled until her face ached at matrons who looked through her as if she were made of glass. By the time the clock struck 11, her feet throbbed and her spirit felt as faded as her gown. "I need air," she murmured to no one, because no one was listening. She slipped away from the ballroom, down a corridor lined with portraits of Ashworth ancestors who stared at her with painted disapproval. The hallway was quieter here, the music reduced to a distant hum. Helena pressed her palm against the cool wall and closed her eyes. Just a moment. Just one moment of peace. Well, what have we here?" Her eyes flew open. Lord Marcus Ellsworth stood before her, blocking her path. He was handsome in the way of men who knew it too well. Golden hair, easy smile, shoulders that filled his coat admirably. But his eyes were wrong, too bright, too eager. "Miss Fairfax, isn't it?" He stepped closer. "Lady Prudence's little companion." Helena's spine straightened. "My lord, I was just returning to the ballroom." "Were you?" He moved again, and suddenly the wall was at her back and he was too near, close enough that she could smell the brandy on his breath. "That seems a waste. The ballroom is so crowded, so many eyes." "Lord Ellsworth." "Marcus." His hand found her waist. "My friends call me Marcus." "We are not friends." Helena tried to step sideways, but he shifted with her, a predator tracking prey. "Please let me pass." "In a moment." His smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been watching you, you know. Standing in corners. Invisible. Unwanted. It must be lonely. I'm perfectly content." "Are you?" His grip tightened. "I think you're desperate. I think you'd do anything for a bit of kindness, a bit of attention." Helena's heart hammered. She could scream, but who would believe her? A companion accusing a viscount? She would be ruined, dismissed, thrown onto the streets without a reference. "Let me go," she whispered. "No one would miss you." His breath was hot against her ear. "No one would even notice if you disappeared. That's the truth, isn't it? You're nothing. Nobody." His hand slid lower. Helena heard footsteps, heavy, measured, approaching from the far end of the corridor. Without thinking, without breathing, she made a choice. She let her body go limp and fell. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. The scent of sandalwood and something darker enveloped her. She felt herself lifted, cradled against a chest that felt like iron beneath fine wool. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could feel it. "What the devil?" Lord Ellsworth's voice, shocked and suddenly uncertain. Helena knew she should keep her eyes closed. A proper faint meant closed eyes, limp limbs, utter helplessness. But fear and desperation made her reckless. She let her lashes flutter just barely, and found herself staring directly into the face of the Duke of Ravenswood. His eyes were inches from hers, grey as gunmetal, cold as Arctic seas, and in their depths she saw something that made her blood freeze. He knew. He had seen her eyes open. He had felt her body tense in his arms instead of hanging slack. He knew this was no feint, and he was looking at her with an intensity that stripped away every pretense. Then his gaze shifted to Lord Ellsworth, and the temperature in the corridor dropped 10 degrees. "Ellsworth?" The Duke's voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. "Care to explain why Miss Fairfax collapsed in your presence?" She, Ellsworth stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "She simply fainted. Overwarm, perhaps. I was about to summon help." "Were you?" The Duke's arms tightened around Helena. With your hand on her waist, footsteps, voices. Other guests were approaching, drawn by the commotion. Helena saw faces appearing at the end of the corridor, curious, scandalized, delighted by the prospect of gossip. Lord Ellsworth's expression flickered. He was calculating, Helena realized, weighing his options. If he stayed, he would have to explain. If he left, "I'll fetch a physician," he said quickly, and vanished into the shadows like the coward he was. But the damage was done. A dozen witnesses had gathered now, staring at Helena in the Duke of Ravenswood's arms. Lady Prudence pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of horror. "Helena!" Her cousin's voice dripped with false concern. "Whatever has happened?" The Duke looked at the gathered crowd, then at Helena. Then, with a deliberateness that made her heart stop entirely, he said, "She's with me." 3 words, 3 simple words that fell like stones into still water. Helena felt the ripples spreading outward, shock, confusion, speculation, and knew with terrible certainty that her life had just changed forever. The Duke carried her through the crowd as if she weighed nothing. Helena didn't dare speak, didn't dare move, could only watch the chandeliers pass overhead and wonder what kind of rescue this was. He didn't stop until they reached a small parlor, empty and quiet, far from the whispers that were surely spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Only then did he set her on her feet. Helena's legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet his eyes. "Your Grace, you weren't fainting." It wasn't a question. She swallowed. "No. Ellsworth had you cornered." "Yes. And you chose to fall into my arms rather than scream." Helena lifted her chin. "Screaming would have ruined me. He would have denied everything. No one believes a companion over a viscount." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, the Duke of Ice didn't do warmth, but something like respect. "So you gambled, on a stranger, on the only man in that corridor who could protect me without question." Silence stretched between them. The Duke studied her with those unnerving grey eyes, and Helena forced herself not to look away. "You're clever," he finally said, "and brave, and completely ruined." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "My declaration. She's with me." What do you think those words meant to that crowd? Helena's mind raced. With me. Not, I was helping her. Not, she needed assistance. With me. As if she belonged to him, as if they had an understanding, an arrangement. "They think I'm your mistress," she whispered. "They think you might be. By morning they'll be certain." His voice held no emotion. "Your reputation, Miss Fairfax, is destroyed." The morning light that filtered through the grimy window of Helena's tiny room felt like an accusation. She had not slept. How could she sleep when her entire world had collapsed in the space of a single evening? The door burst open without ceremony. Lady Prudence stood on the threshold, her face twisted with fury. "For you scheming, manipulative little—" She caught herself, but barely. "Did you plan this? Did you throw yourself at the Duke deliberately?" Cousin, please, don't you dare cousin me. Prudence's voice shook. The whole of London is talking about you. About how Lord Ravenswood carried you through the ballroom like some prize he'd won. About how he declared you were with him for everyone to hear. It wasn't what it looked like. I don't care what it was. Prudence's eyes were cold. I care what it looks like, and it looks like my companion has become the Duke of Ravenswood's whore. The word hit like a slap. Helena flinched, but didn't look away. Get out. Prudence pointed at the door. Pack your things, what little there is, and get out of my house. I won't have your scandal touching my family. Prudence, I have nowhere to go. That is not my concern. Her cousin smiled, and it was cruel. Perhaps your duke will take you in. You've certainly earned his attention. Within the hour, Helena stood on the street with a single battered valise containing everything she owned in the world. The fog curled around her ankles like a living thing. The sky was grey. The future was greyer. She had no money, no references, no family willing to claim her. A woman alone in London with a reputation in tatters. She knew what happened to women like her. She had seen them on street corners, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. She started walking. The city swirled around her. Carriages and costermongers, gentlemen in top hats and beggars in rags. No one looked at her twice. She was invisible again, but now invisibility felt like a death sentence. A black carriage pulled alongside her. Helena kept walking. It was probably nothing, probably someone else's concern, someone else's story. The carriage kept pace. Miss Fairfax. She stopped. The carriage door swung open, and the Duke of Ravenswood looked out at her with those storm-grey eyes. Get in, he said. It wasn't a request. Helena should have refused, should have summoned what remained of her pride and walked away. But her feet ached, and her heart was broken, and he was the only person in London who had bothered to learn her name. She climbed into the carriage. The interior was dark, intimate, smelling of leather and sandalwood. The Duke sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, his expression unreadable. Lady Prudence dismissed you, he said. How did you know? Because I know women like Lady Prudence. His jaw tightened. Where were you planning to go? Helena almost laughed. Almost. I hadn't quite worked that out yet. You were walking toward the river. The observation hung in the air. Helena didn't answer. I've made inquiries, the Duke continued. You have no family, no friends willing to risk their own reputations, no prospects. Your Grace has been thorough. I'm always thorough. He leaned forward and suddenly the carriage felt smaller. Miss Fairfax, I have a proposition. Helena's hands clenched in her lap. I am not what Lady Prudence accused me of being. I know. His voice softened just slightly. That's not what I'm offering. She waited. Marriage, he said, to me. Helena stared at him, as if he had spoken in tongues. I beg your pardon? Marriage. The Duke's expression didn't flicker. A legal union, a contract. My name, my protection, my fortune, in exchange for your presence and your discretion. Why? The question seemed to surprise him. Because I destroyed your reputation, because I owe you a debt, because... He stopped, looked away. Because I need a wife, and you need a future. This arrangement serves us both. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you're intelligent. Foolish women don't think to fake faints. I know you're brave. You looked Ellsworth in the eye when most women would have wept. I know you have dignity. You're sitting in my carriage without crying or begging or trying to seduce me into better terms. Helena's cheeks flushed. Those are low standards for a duchess. They're higher than you might think. His eyes met hers. I'm not offering love, Miss Fairfax. I'm not capable of it. But I'm offering safety, comfort, a life where no one will ever look through you again. The words struck something deep within her. A life where no one will ever look through you again. How long had she been invisible? How long had she stood in corners, holding shawls, watching others live, while she merely existed? And in return, she asked, what do you want from me? Play the part. Attend events on my arm. Manage my household. Give society no reason to question our union. He paused. We would maintain separate chambers. I would make no demands upon your person. Separate chambers, no demands. A marriage of convenience in the truest sense. And if I refuse, then I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else. A small town, perhaps. A new name. His voice was matter-of-fact. But we both know that's a half-life at best. People talk, rumors travel. Eventually, your past would find you. Helena looked out the carriage window. London rolled past, grey and indifferent, a city that devoured women like her without a second thought. She thought of her father, who had called her his treasure. She thought of the life she'd imagined, a husband who loved her, children who laughed, a home that was truly hers. That dream was dead now. Ellsworth had killed it, and the Duke had buried it with 3 little words. But perhaps there was something to be built from the ashes. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you." The Duke nodded once, as if she had merely confirmed a business appointment. "We'll marry by special license. 3 days. The sooner we end the speculation, the better. 3 days. 3 days until she became a duchess. 3 days until she belonged to this cold, beautiful stranger." "Your Grace," she said quietly. "Thank you." He looked at her then, really looked, and for just a moment something flickered behind those frozen eyes. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "You don't know what you're agreeing to." The wedding was a quiet affair. A small chapel, empty pews, vows spoken to a minister who seemed half asleep. Helena wore a dress borrowed from a modiste who owed the Duke a favor, pale blue silk that made her feel like someone else entirely. The ring he slid onto her finger was heavy with diamonds, cold against her skin. "You may kiss the bride," the minister droned. The Duke leaned in. Helena's heart stuttered, but his lips merely brushed her cheek, dry and impersonal, before he pulled away. "It's done," he said. "Done." She was the Duchess of Ravenswood. She had a title, a fortune, a husband who looked at her like she was a problem he had solved. The carriage ride to Ravenswood House was silent. Helena watched the city transform around them, the cramped streets giving way to elegant squares, the townhouses growing taller and grander until they stopped before a mansion that seemed to swallow the sky. "Welcome home," the Duke said, but there was no warmth in it. The staff lined up to greet her, a butler with a face carved from granite, a housekeeper with kind eyes and suspicious posture, maids and footmen who stared at her as if she were a curiosity at a fair. "This is Mrs. Barnes, the housekeeper," the Duke said. "She will show you to your rooms. I have business to attend to." And just like that, he was gone. Helena stood in the grand foyer of her new home, surrounded by strangers, and wondered what she had done. "You must be absolutely exhausted." The voice came from the staircase, bright, warm, and entirely unexpected. Helena turned to find a young woman descending toward her, all bouncing curls and curious eyes. She was perhaps 20, with the Duke's dark hair, but none of his coldness. Her smile was genuine, delighted, as if Helena were a gift she had been waiting to unwrap. "I'm Charlotte," the young woman said, reaching for Helena's hands. "Alexander's sister, and you're Helena. Oh, I've been dying to meet you." "Lady Charlotte, just Charlotte, please. We're sisters now, aren't we?" She squeezed Helena's fingers. "I must confess, I never thought Alexander would marry again. He's been so... well, you've met him. You know." Helena didn't know, not really, but she nodded anyway. "Come," Charlotte said, linking her arm through Helena's. "Let me show you the house. Mrs. Barnes is wonderful, but she'll bore you with talk of linens and menus. I'll show you the important things. The library, the garden, the room where Alexander thinks no one can find him when he wants to brood." Despite everything, Helena felt her lips twitch. "He broods. Constantly. Magnificently. It's really quite impressive." Charlotte's eyes sparkled. "But perhaps you'll change that. Perhaps you'll be good for him." Helena doubted it. She doubted she would be anything to Alexander Ashford, except a solution to a problem. But she let Charlotte lead her through the gleaming halls, and she tried to feel like she belonged. The house was beautiful and cold. Marble floors, high ceilings, paintings of ancestors who glared down with disapproval. Every room was immaculate and lifeless, as if no one had truly lived here in years. "It needs a woman's touch," Charlotte said, reading her thoughts. "It's been like a mausoleum since Eleanor died." Eleanor, the first wife, the one who had supposedly frozen to death in the Duke's presence. What was she like? Helena asked before she could stop herself. Charlotte's brightness dimmed. "Beautiful, charming. Everyone adored her." She paused. "Alexander, most of all. He's never been the same since." There was something in her voice, a hesitation, a careful choosing of words that made Helena wonder. But before she could ask more, they arrived at a set of double doors. "Your chambers," Charlotte said. "I'll let you rest." "But Helena—" She caught her hand again. "I'm glad you're here, truly." Alone at last, Helena surveyed her new domain. The room was vast and elegant, decorated in shades of blue and cream. A fire crackled in the hearth. Fresh flowers stood on every surface. Through a doorway, she glimpsed a dressing room larger than the entire room she had occupied at Prudence's house. She walked to the window and looked out at the garden below. It was February, the flower beds bare, the trees skeletal. But she could imagine it in spring, alive with colour and possibility. A knock at the door made her turn. The Duke stood on the threshold. He had removed his coat, and his shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscled. Helena felt her cheeks warm and looked away. "You've met Charlotte," he said. "She's lovely. She's a hurricane in human form." But there was fondness in his voice, the first real emotion she had heard from him. "She'll probably try to befriend you to death. I apologize in advance." "I don't mind." Helena hesitated. "Your Grace, Alexander, if we're to convince society this marriage is real, you should use my name. Alexander." It felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. "I wanted to ask, what are the rules?" "Rules? For this arrangement. You said we would maintain separate chambers, that you would make no demands. But surely there are expectations, things you require of me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the room to stand before her, close enough that she could smell sandalwood, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I require honesty," he said. "Do not lie to me, even when the truth is unpleasant. I require discretion. What happens in this house stays in this house. And I require—" He stopped. "What?" His jaw tightened. "I require that you do not try to make this into something it isn't. This is an arrangement. A contract, nothing more." Helena held his gaze. "I understand. Do you?" Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or warning. Women often think they can change a man, fix him, save him. "I am not broken, Helena. I am simply finished. There is nothing left to save." The words should have been cold, should have felt like a door slamming shut. Instead, Helena heard something else beneath them. A wound, still raw. A heart that had been shattered so thoroughly he couldn't imagine it whole again. "I won't try to save you," she said quietly. "But I won't pretend you're not worth saving either." He stared at her. For one breathless moment, something cracked in his expression. Surprise, confusion, something almost like hope. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Dinner is at 8, he said. "Charlotte will show you where." He left without another word. Helena stood alone in her beautiful empty room and wondered if she had just made the bravest decision of her life, or the most foolish. 3 weeks into her marriage, Helena had learned several things about the Duke of Ravenswood. He rose before dawn and rode regardless of weather. He took his breakfast alone, his lunch at his club, and his dinner in near silence. He avoided her with a skill that bordered on artistry, and when they were forced into the same room, he looked through her as if she were made of smoke. It should not have hurt. This was what she had agreed to, a marriage of convenience, a contract, nothing more. But somehow, in the quiet moments, Helena found herself wishing for something else. She filled her days with activity. She reorganized the household accounts, which had been neglected since Eleanor's death. She replanted the conservatory with flowers that would bloom in spring. She became Charlotte's closest confidant, listening to tales of unsuitable suitors and society scandals. She made herself useful, valuable, necessary, because if she wasn't needed, she didn't know what she was. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with small things. A book left on her breakfast table, one she had mentioned wanting to read. Fresh flowers in her room, the exact shade of yellow that reminded her of her father's garden. A fire always burning in the library when she went there to read in the evenings, though she had never told anyone of her habits. Someone was paying attention, someone was watching, and Helena had a suspicion she knew who. The night everything changed began like any other. Helena was curled in a chair by the library fire, lost in a novel, when thunder cracked overhead with enough force to rattle the windows. She screamed. It was involuntary, humiliating, a childhood terror she had never outgrown. Lightning illuminated the room in stark white, and she cowered deeper into the chair, her heart racing, her breath coming in short gasps. The door burst open. Alexander stood there, disheveled from sleep, his robe hastily thrown over his shoulders. His eyes swept the room, searching for an intruder, a threat, something to fight. "Helena!" He crossed to her in 3 strides. "What's wrong? What happened?" "The storm." She could barely get the words out. "I'm sorry, Thunder boomed again. Helena flinched so violently she nearly fell from the chair, and then, without a word, Alexander sat down beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't pull her into his arms or whisper empty reassurances. He simply sat there, solid and warm and present, a bulwark against the chaos outside. When I was a boy, he said quietly, I was afraid of the dark. Helena looked at him. His face was turned toward the fire, his profile sharp in the flickering light. My father thought it was weakness. He locked me in a closet overnight to cure me. His voice was flat, matter of fact. It didn't cure me. I simply learned to hide it better. Another flash of lightning. Helena's hand shot out instinctively and gripped his arm. He tensed beneath her touch, but he didn't pull away. We all have fears we're ashamed of, he said. The trick is finding someone who doesn't make you feel ashamed. They sat in silence as the storm raged outside. Helena's grip on his arm slowly loosened, but she didn't let go entirely. And when she finally looked up at him, exhausted and wrung out, something had shifted between them. Thank you, she whispered. Alexander turned his head. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes dropped to her lips and Helena's breath caught. Go to bed, Helena. His voice was rough. Before I do something we both regret. He stood and left without looking back. But Helena sat in the library long after the storm had passed, touching her arm where his warmth still lingered, and wondering what it would feel like if he didn't regret it at all. The days that followed were a peculiar kind of torture. Alexander no longer avoided her. If anything, he seemed to seek out her presence with increasing frequency. He appeared at breakfast, asking about her plans for the day. He lingered in the library during her evening reading, ostensibly reviewing correspondence, but glancing at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. He accompanied her and Charlotte to a gallery exhibition, standing close enough that their shoulders brushed, saying nothing but watching her face as she admired the paintings. Helena didn't know what to make of it. Each stolen glance, each accidental touch, each moment of unexpected proximity sent her pulse racing and her thoughts into chaos. She had agreed to a marriage of convenience. She had promised not to try to change him, but somewhere along the way, without her permission, her heart had begun to want things she couldn't name. He's different with you, Charlotte observed one afternoon. They were walking in Hyde Park, enjoying a rare hour of winter sunshine. I've never seen him like this. Like what? Present. Charlotte's brow furrowed thoughtfully. Since Eleanor died, it's as if part of him went somewhere else, somewhere none of us could reach. But lately, he's here again. Really here. Helena's chest tightened. I haven't done anything. Haven't you? Charlotte smiled knowingly. You've done the one thing no one else could do. You've made him curious. And Alexander, when he becomes curious about something or someone, doesn't rest until he understands. That evening, Helena found herself dressing with unusual care for dinner. She chose a gown of deep emerald silk, one of the many that had appeared in her wardrobe since the wedding, each one more beautiful than the last. She let the maid arrange her hair in soft curls, and she wore the pearl earrings that had been a wedding gift from Charlotte. She told herself it was simply good manners. A duchess should look presentable. But when she descended the staircase and saw Alexander waiting in the foyer, when his eyes swept over her, and something hot and hungry flashed through them before he could hide it, she knew she was lying to herself. You look... He stopped, cleared his throat. Shall we go in? Dinner was an exercise in controlled tension. Every brush of fingers as dishes were passed, every meeting of eyes across the candlelit table, every moment of silence that stretched just a beat too long, all of it crackled with an electricity that made Helena's skin feel too tight for her body. Charlotte, oblivious or perhaps deliberately mischievous, excused herself early. I have letters to write, she announced, her eyes dancing with barely concealed glee. Don't wait up. And then they were alone. Alexander set down his wineglass with deliberate precision. Helena, yes? This, he gestured vaguely between them. Whatever this is becoming, we need to discuss it. Her heart hammered. What is it becoming? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. I thought I knew the rules. I thought I knew myself. But when I'm near you, he broke off, his jaw tight. I find myself forgetting everything I swore I would never forget. What did you swear? That I would never be vulnerable again. Never let anyone close enough to... He stood abruptly, moving to the window. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed and haunted. Eleanor didn't love me. Our marriage was an arrangement, much like ours. But I was young and foolish enough to believe I could make her love me. I gave her everything. My heart, my trust, my complete devotion. And she... He stopped. What did she do? Helena's voice was barely a whisper. She laughed at me, took lovers, made me a joke among my own peers. His voice was raw. When she died, I was relieved, and then I was ashamed of my relief. I swore I would never feel so much for anyone again. It was safer to feel nothing at all. Helena rose from her chair. Slowly, carefully, she crossed the room to stand behind him. Their reflections faced each other in the dark glass. Two people separated by inches and miles of accumulated pain. "I'm not Eleanor," she said softly. "I know." His voice cracked. "That's what terrifies me." She reached out and touched his shoulder. He flinched but didn't pull away. Beneath her palm, she could feel the tension coiled in his muscles, the war raging inside him. "I'm not asking you to feel anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to trust me or love me or open yourself to hurt again. I'm simply asking you to stop running, to let yourself be here in this moment, with me." Alexander turned. They were close now, close enough that she could see the rapid pulse beating in his throat, close enough to count the silver threads in his grey eyes. "And if I can't stop at just being here?" His voice was rough. "If I want more than moments?" Helena's breath caught. "Then I suppose we'll figure that out together." He lifted his hand. His fingers trembled as they brushed her cheek, traced the line of her jaw, came to rest against the racing pulse at her throat. "I'm going to kiss you," he said. "Tell me to stop." Helena said nothing. His mouth descended on hers, and the world caught fire. The kiss ended too soon, and not nearly soon enough. Alexander pulled back, his breath ragged, his eyes wild with something that looked like fear. Helena stood frozen, her lips still tingling, her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I shouldn't have done that," he said. The words hit like ice water. Helena stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I see." "No." He reached for her, then stopped, his hand hovering in the air between them. "You don't see. I shouldn't have done that because now I don't know how to stop. Now I know what you taste like, what you feel like, and I—" He ran his fingers through his hair, destroying its careful arrangement. "I'm not a man who does things halfway, Helena. If I let myself want you, I will want all of you. Every thought, every smile, every breath. I will consume you, and I don't know if I can bear to destroy something else. He stopped. "Something you what?" Helena whispered. But Alexander was already retreating, his walls slamming back into place. "It's late. We should retire." He left her standing alone in the dining room, her lips burning with the ghost of his kiss, and her heart breaking with the weight of his unfinished sentence. The weeks that followed were exquisite torture. Alexander kept his distance during the day, but his eyes followed her everywhere, across breakfast tables, through crowded ballrooms, in the quiet moments when he thought she wasn't looking. And at night, Helena lay awake in her empty bed, staring at the door that connected their chambers, wondering if he was doing the same. Society, meanwhile, had finally accepted the new Duchess of Ravenswood. The whispers had faded, replaced by grudging respect. Helena wore diamonds now, spoke with confidence, moved through ballrooms as if she belonged there. And men who had never seen her before, suddenly couldn't stop seeing her. It started at the Pemberton Ball. Lord Ashworth, a handsome widower with kind eyes and a gentle manner, asked Helena to dance. She accepted because refusing would have been rude, and because some petty part of her wanted Alexander to notice. He noticed. From across the ballroom, Helena felt his gaze like a physical touch. Lord Ashworth was saying something about the weather, but she couldn't hear him over the thunder of her own pulse. Alexander stood by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression carved from stone. But his eyes were burning. When the dance ended, Lord Ashworth escorted her back to her husband. Alexander said nothing, did nothing, simply offered Helena his arm with a coldness that made her shiver. The carriage ride home was silent, suffocating. Helena wanted to scream at him, to demand he explain the contradiction of pushing her away while looking at her like she was the only woman in the world. "You're angry," she finally said. "I'm not angry. You haven't spoken since we left the ball." "I have nothing to say." Helena turned to face him fully. "Liar." Something snapped in his expression. "You want to know what I have to say? Fine, I'll tell you." He leaned forward, and the small space of the carriage felt suddenly dangerous. Watching another man hold you, touch you, make you smile, it made me want to tear him apart with my bare hands. I wanted to drag you out of that ballroom and make you forget his name, forget every name except mine. I wanted— He stopped, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I have no right." The words exploded from him. "I made the rules, Helena. Separate chambers, no demands, a marriage of convenience. I don't get to change them just because— Because what?" He looked at her then, really looked, and what she saw in his eyes stole her breath. "Because I'm falling in love with you," he said, "and it terrifies me." Helena didn't remember crossing the space between them. One moment they were on opposite seats, the next she was in his arms, his mouth claiming hers with a desperation that bordered on violence. His hands were in her hair, on her waist, pulling her closer as if he could absorb her into his very being. Helena. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is a mistake. It's not a mistake. She kissed his jaw, his throat, the wildly beating pulse beneath his ear. It was never a mistake. The carriage stopped. They were home. Alexander pulled back, his chest heaving, his eyes dark with desire and something deeper. Come to my room tonight, he said. Not because I'm demanding it, because I'm asking, because I want you there, because I can't spend another night knowing you're just down the hall and not beside me. Helena touched his face. Yes, that night, the corridor between their chambers was finally crossed, and when Helena woke in Alexander's arms the next morning, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, she knew that everything had changed. The days that followed were like living inside a dream. Alexander, once so cold and distant, became a different man entirely, tender in private, possessive in public, and utterly, devastatingly devoted. He brought her breakfast in bed. He read poetry to her by firelight. He learned every secret her body held and worshipped each one with hands and lips and whispered adorations. I wasted so much time, he murmured one night, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder, keeping you at arm's length, pretending I didn't need you. You were afraid. I was a coward. He kissed the curve of her neck. Never again. I will never hide from you again. Helena believed him. How could she not, when he looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked? But even paradise has its serpents. But happiness, Helena was learning, came with its own dangers. The more she had, the more she feared losing it, and there were forces in London that would be only too happy to take it from her. Lady Vivian Blackwood arrived at Ravenswood House on a Tuesday morning, announced by a footman and dressed in widow's black that somehow managed to be more alluring than any ball gown. She swept into the drawing-room where Helena sat with Charlotte, all graceful condescension and knowing smiles. "My dear Duchess," she purred, "I simply had to call. Alexander and I are such old friends, and I've been dying to meet the woman who finally captured his attention." The emphasis she placed on certain words made Helena's stomach tighten. Old friends, captured, as if Helena had trapped Alexander rather than saved him. "Lady Blackwood." Helena rose, grateful that her voice didn't waver. "How kind of you to visit. Vivian, please, after all, we have so much in common." Her smile sharpened. "We've both shared Alexander's attention." Charlotte made a small sound of outrage, but Helena forced herself to remain calm. "Indeed? How fortunate for you that you have such fond memories." The barb landed. Vivian's smile flickered just for a moment before recovering. "Oh, my memories are more than fond. Alexander and I were quite close before his marriage to Eleanor, and after her death, she let the implication hang in the air like poison. I'm sure my husband values your friendship," Helena said coolly, "but if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." She left the room before Vivian could respond, her composure cracking the moment she was alone. Her hands were shaking, her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Alexander found her in the conservatory an hour later, surrounded by the flowers she had planted, trying to pretend her heart wasn't breaking. "Vivian was here," he said. "It wasn't a question. She made sure to remind me of your history together." Alexander moved closer. "Helena, look at me." She didn't want to. She didn't want him to see the jealousy eating her alive, the fear that she was just another name on a list of women who had loved the Duke of Ravenswood. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Vivienne and I were never lovers. She pursued me after Eleanor's death, and I'll admit I considered it, not because I wanted her, but because I wanted to feel nothing, and she seemed like the kind of woman who would demand nothing. But I couldn't do it. Even when I thought my heart was dead, something in me knew it wasn't the right path. She implied what she wanted you to believe. Vivian is a beautiful woman, but she's also a calculating one. She wants what she cannot have, and now that I'm happily married—" He stopped as if the words had surprised him. "Now that I'm happily married, she wants to destroy it." Helena's breath caught. "Happily married?" Alexander's expression softened. "Did you doubt it?" "I doubt everything." The confession spilled out before she could stop it. "I doubt that this is real. I doubt that you truly want me. I doubt that someone like you could ever love someone like me. A penniless companion with nothing to offer but everything," he cut her off. "You offer everything. You offer honesty when everyone else lies. You offer warmth when I've known nothing but cold. You offer yourself, not the Duchess, not the wife, but Helena, the woman who was brave enough to fall into a stranger's arms, the woman who challenged me when everyone else cowered, the woman who—" His voice broke. "The woman who taught me that my heart wasn't dead after all, just waiting." He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise, and when he pulled back, Helena saw something in his eyes that made her fears dissolve like morning mist. "I love you," he said, "not because I should, not because I must, because I cannot imagine a life without you in it, because you are my second chance, my unexpected grace, my—" "Yours," she finished. "I am yours, Alexander, completely and forever yours." They stood together in the conservatory, wrapped in each other, the scent of flowers surrounding them like a blessing. Helena thought she had never been happier. She should have known it couldn't last. The following week brought a dinner party at Lord and Lady Pemberton's. Helena dressed in burgundy velvet, Alexander's favourite, and wore the ruby necklace he had given her for their 1-month anniversary. She felt beautiful. She felt invincible. She felt Lady Vivian Blackwood's eyes on her the moment she entered the room. The widow had not given up. Throughout the evening she orbited Alexander like a pale moon, touching his arm during conversation, laughing too loudly at his remarks, referring to shared memories that pointedly excluded Helena. "Do you remember the summer at Brighton, Alexander? Before your marriage to Eleanor?" Vivian's voice carried across the dinner table. "We had such delightful rides along the shore. You always said I was the finest horsewoman you'd ever seen." Alexander's expression remained neutral. "I don't recall saying that." "Oh, but you did. You said many things that summer." Vivian's smile was sharp as cut glass. "Things I've never forgotten." Helena's fingers tightened on her wineglass. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her drink in the woman's perfect face. Instead, she smiled serenely and changed the subject. But later, in the carriage, her composure cracked. "She's in love with you," Helena said flatly. "She's in love with my title. Does it matter? She wants you, she makes no secret of it, and I'm supposed to sit there and smile while she— While she what? Alexander pulled her onto his lap, tilting her face up to his. "While she embarrasses herself in front of everyone? While she makes it perfectly clear that she's desperate and I'm indifferent? You weren't indifferent at Brighton. At Brighton I was a young fool trying to forget a wife who despised me. I found no comfort with Vivian, only emptiness." His eyes burned into hers. "There has only been one woman who made me feel anything real. One woman who saw through every wall I built. One woman I would burn the world for." He kissed her hard, possessively. "You, Helena. Only ever you." She believed him. She did. But the jealousy still coiled in her stomach like a living thing, and she hated herself for the weakness of it. "I want to mark you," she whispered against his mouth. "I want everyone to know you're mine." Alexander's laugh was dark and delighted. "Then mark me, Duchess. I am entirely at your disposal." She did. And when they finally made it to their bedchamber, Helena made absolutely certain that neither of them would forget who belonged to whom. The letter arrived on a grey morning in late March, delivered by a nervous footman who wouldn't meet Helena's eyes. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the seal unremarkable, but the contents made her blood run cold. "Your Grace, how quickly the world forgets. But I remember everything. The dark corridor, your frightened eyes, the Duke's convenient rescue. One might wonder what really happened that night, and what secrets you might be hiding behind your borrowed diamonds. A friend who knows the truth." Helena's hands trembled as she read the words again and again. There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew exactly who had sent it. Lord Marcus Ellsworth had not forgotten. She burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken. But the threat remained, a shadow at the edge of her happiness. More letters came. To her at first, then to others. Society hostesses received anonymous notes questioning the circumstances of the Ravenswood marriage. Newspapers received hints about scandals involving dukes and desperate companions. The whispers started again, quieter than before but persistent, poisonous. Helena watched it happen with growing dread. A cut direct from a countess who had previously been friendly. An invitation withdrawn at the last moment. Conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. "They're turning against me," she told Charlotte one afternoon. "I can feel it." "They're fools," Charlotte said fiercely. "Anyone who believes those lies isn't worth knowing. But if enough people believe them, then Alexander will set them straight. You know he would." That was precisely what Helena feared. Alexander's temper, once roused, was legendary. If he discovered what Ellsworth was doing, there was no telling what lengths he might go to. A duel, a scandal, prison even. She would not let her past destroy his future. So she said nothing. She smiled through the snubs. She pretended not to notice the whispers. She carried the weight of Ellsworth's campaign alone, convinced she was protecting the man she loved. She was wrong. Helena said nothing to Alexander. He had enough burdens without adding her fears to them. She would handle this herself. She had survived worse. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves. Alexander found her crying in the library one evening, a fresh letter clutched in her hands. He took one look at her face, and his expression transformed into something terrible. Who? The single word was barely human. It doesn't matter. Who, Helena? She surrendered the letter, watched his eyes scan the vicious words, accusations, insinuations, threats to reveal the truth about that night at Ashworth Manor if she didn't convince her husband to pay a substantial sum. Alexander went very still. Ellsworth, we can't prove it. We don't need to prove it. He was already moving toward the door. I'm going to kill him. Alexander, wait. Helena caught his arm. That's exactly what he wants. A scandal, a duel. Your reputation destroyed and me at the center of it all. He can't hurt us if we don't let him. He's already hurting you. Those letters are words, just words, and they only have power if we give it to them. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I spent years being invisible, being powerless. I won't spend one more day letting a man like Marcus Ellsworth control my life. We will face this together, and we will win. Not with violence, with truth. Alexander stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the murderous rage in his eyes dimmed to something warmer. When did you become so wise? I learned from a man who taught me that the strongest walls are the ones we choose to lower. He pulled her into his arms. We'll handle this together. But Helena, if he threatens you again, if he so much as looks at you wrong, I cannot promise restraint. I know. She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in the scent of him. I know. The weeks leading up to the Devonshire ball were a strange mixture of dread and determination. Helena prepared for battle in her own way, refusing to hide, refusing to cower, attending every event with her head held high and Alexander's hand clasped firmly in hers. They became a spectacle, though not the kind Ellsworth had intended. Society watched the Duke of Ravenswood transform before their eyes, laughing in public, dancing with his wife, looking at her as though she hung the moon. Those who had believed the rumors began to doubt them. Those who had cut Helena began to regret it. They're afraid of you now, Charlotte observed with glee. Afraid of missing out. The Duchess of Ravenswood is the most sought-after hostess in London, and anyone who snubbed you is terrified of being left off the guest list. I don't want their fear. Then want their respect. You've earned it, Helena, not through Alexander's name, but through your own dignity. Helena considered this. It was true that she had changed. The invisible companion who had held shawls in corners was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth, not because of the diamonds around her neck, but because she had survived everything life had thrown at her and emerged stronger. She was ready for the final confrontation. The confrontation came at the Devonshire ball, the last great event of the season. Helena had dressed with care, sapphire silk that matched her husband's eyes, diamonds at her throat that caught every light. She was armor-clad in beauty, and Alexander stood beside her like a dark angel of vengeance. They had barely entered the ballroom when she saw him. Lord Ellsworth stood near the punch table, surrounded by admirers who didn't know the monster behind the charming smile. His eyes found Helena across the room, and he raised his glass in a mocking salute. "Ignore him," Alexander murmured. "I intend to." They danced. They smiled. They performed the roles of the happy couple, while Ellsworth circled like a shark scenting blood. Helena could feel him watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It came during the supper interval. Helena had stepped onto the terrace for air, and suddenly Ellsworth was there, blocking her path back inside. "Your Grace." His smile was poison wrapped in silk. "What a pleasure. I've so enjoyed our correspondence." "We have no correspondence, Lord Ellsworth. Only your cowardly anonymous letters." "Cowardly?" He stepped closer. "I prefer strategic. You see, I've been telling a very interesting story to some very influential people, about a desperate companion who threw herself at a duke, about a convenient fainting spell that was perhaps not so accidental, about a marriage built on manipulation and lies. No one will believe you, won't they? Society loves a scandal, and I've been quite persuasive." His voice dropped to a whisper. Your husband may have money and power, but I have something better. I have the truth. And the truth, my dear Duchess, is that you trapped him. You planned it all from the beginning. Helena's fear crystallized into something harder, something brighter. The truth, Lord Ellsworth, is that you are a predator who preys on women who cannot fight back. But I can fight back, and so can my husband. Your husband is not here. Isn't he? Alexander's voice came from the darkness behind Ellsworth, low and dangerous as a drawn blade. I believe you owe my wife an apology. Ellsworth spun around, his confidence faltering for the first time. Ravenswood, we were just... I heard what you were just. Alexander stepped into the light, and his face was a mask of cold fury. I also heard the lies you've been spreading, the letters you've been sending, the campaign of harassment against a woman whose only crime was refusing your advances. You can't prove... I don't need to prove anything. Alexander's smile was terrifying. I need only speak. One word from me, and your creditors will call in every debt. One word and every door in London will close to you. One word and you will be finished. Ellsworth's face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me. The terrace had drawn a crowd now. Curious guests who sensed drama and had gathered to witness it. Helena saw their faces in the torchlight, watching, waiting, judging. Alexander turned to address them, his voice carrying across the night air. Lord Ellsworth has been spreading vicious lies about my wife. I want every person here to know the truth. On the night we met, Helena Fairfax was being attacked by this man. She had the courage and intelligence to escape him. I had the honor of helping her, and I have spent every day since thanking God that she came into my life. He turned back to Helena, and his eyes softened. She is not a schemer or a manipulator. She is the bravest woman I have ever known. She is my wife, my partner, my heart, and anyone who insults her insults me. The crowd murmured. Helena saw sympathy in some faces, admiration in others, and on Ellsworth's face, fear. This is not over, Ellsworth hissed. Yes, Alexander said calmly. It is. By tomorrow you will be on a ship to the continent. You will not return. You will not write. You will not speak my wife's name ever again. Do you understand? Ellsworth looked around at the watching crowd, searching for allies and finding none. His charm had evaporated, leaving only the ugly truth of what he was. He turned and fled. Alexander gathered Helena into his arms right there on the terrace, in front of everyone. Propriety be damned. Are you all right? I am now. She looked up at him, this man who had claimed her with 3 words and defended her with 1,000 more. You didn't have to do that. Make such a public declaration. Yes, I did. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. The world should know what you are to me, what you will always be. And what is that? Everything, he said simply. You are everything. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, and this time the whispers were different. Admiring, envious. The Duke of Ice had melted and all of London had witnessed it. Helena danced every dance with her husband that night. She smiled until her face ached. She let herself be happy, truly happy, without the shadow of fear darkening the edges. When they finally returned home, Alexander carried her over the threshold like a new bride. What are you doing? She laughed. Making up for lost time. He kissed her nose, her cheeks, her lips. The first time you entered this house you were a stranger. Now you're my heart. It seems appropriate to mark the difference. You're a romantic. Only for you. He set her down gently, keeping her in the circle of his arms. I have something for you. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Inside, nestled against white silk, was a ring. Not the cold diamond he had placed on her finger at their wedding, but something warmer. A golden band set with a single amber stone, the exact color of her eyes. I wanted to give you something that was yours, he said quietly. Not a duchess's jewels, not a wife's obligation. Something that is purely, simply, for Helena, the woman I love. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Alexander, I know our beginning was unconventional. I know you didn't choose me so much as circumstances forced us together. But I choose you now, today and every day. I choose you, Helena, with everything I am and everything I will ever be. She couldn't speak, could only hold out her hand and let him slide the ring onto her finger, next to the diamond that now meant something entirely different. I choose you too, she finally managed. I will always choose you. They didn't make it to their bedchamber that night. The library floor served well enough, and then the stairs and eventually the hallway outside their rooms. When dawn broke, they were tangled together in Alexander's bed, exhausted and happy and finally completely home. 1 year later, Helena stood at the window of Ashworth Manor, not the London house where they had first met, but the country estate where they had built their real life. The gardens below burst with summer roses, the fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun, and somewhere in the house a baby was crying. "She has your temper," Alexander said, appearing beside her with their daughter in his arms. Little Rose was 6 months old, with her mother's amber eyes and her father's dark hair, and a disposition that alternated between angelic sweetness and imperious demands. "She has your stubbornness," Helena countered, reaching for the baby. Rose immediately stopped crying, settling against her mother's chest with a contented sigh. "She knows who's in charge." Alexander slipped his arm around Helena's waist, pulling both his girls close. "Just like her father," Helena laughed. "You haven't been in charge since the night you caught me in your arms." "True." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Best decision I never made." Below, in the garden, Charlotte was walking with her new husband, a second son of an earl, chosen not for his title, but for the way he looked at her, as if she hung the moon. Their wedding had been the event of the season, and Helena had cried through the entire ceremony. "Happy?" Alexander asked. Helena considered the question. A year ago, she had been invisible, unwanted, standing in corners, holding shawls, watching life pass her by. Now she was a duchess, a mother, a wife. She was loved and cherished and seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. "Yes," she said, "more than I ever thought possible." Alexander turned her to face him, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby between them. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For falling." His eyes were warm, so different from the ice she had first seen in them. "For being brave enough to fall, and trust that I would catch you. You did catch me. I always will." He kissed her softly, a promise renewed. "For the rest of our lives, Helena, I will always catch you." She thought about that night, the terror, the desperation, the wild gamble that had led her into his arms. She thought about the woman she had been, invisible and overlooked, holding shawls in the corners of ballrooms. She thought about Lady Prudence, who had thrown her out without a reference, and who now sent desperate letters requesting invitations to Ravenswood events. Helena always refused. Some things could not be forgiven. She thought about Lord Ellsworth, exiled on the continent, his fortune gone, his reputation destroyed. She felt no satisfaction in his ruin, only relief that he could never hurt anyone else. And she thought about Eleanor, the first wife, whose cruelty had nearly destroyed Alexander's capacity for love. Helena hoped wherever Eleanor was, that she knew what she had lost, that she understood the man she had thrown away. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked. "About how strange life is, how one moment can change everything. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Helena looked at her husband, this man who had begun as a stranger and become her entire world. She looked at their daughter, sleeping peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream. She looked at the estate spreading out below them, the gardens she had planted, the home they had built together. "Not one moment," she said. "I would do it all again. The fear, the uncertainty, the scandal, all of it, because it led me here, to you, to her, to this life I never dared imagine." Alexander pulled her close, the baby nestled between them, a family bound not by obligation but by choice. "I love you, Helena Ashford, Duchess of Ravenswood. I love you, Alexander, now and always." The sun set over Ashworth Manor, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the nursery, a baby slept. In the garden, lovers walked. And in the drawing room, a duke and his duchess sat together, not speaking, not needing to, simply existing in the quiet miracle of a love that had begun with a lie and become the truest thing either of them had ever known. Some stories end with a ball, a kiss, a declaration. But the best stories, the ones that matter, end with this: two people sitting in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever comes next, they will face it together. Helena leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder and smiled. She had spent her whole life being invisible. Now, in his eyes, she was infinite. And that, she thought, was the greatest fairy tale of all. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this tale along to someone who needs a little hope and romance in their life today. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for being part of our community. Your support inspires us to keep creating stories filled with love, redemption, and the magic of unexpected beginnings. Don't miss what comes next. At the end of this video, you'll find another story waiting to sweep you away. With all our gratitude, the Legends of the Fall team.